Okay, so before we jump into the front end and start to set up and work with Redux, I just want to give you an overview of what Redux is and how it works. Now, Redux is one of the more difficult technologies to try and explain, especially if you're new to React and the whole concept of state. I can pretty much assure you that you're going to be a little confused if you're just getting started with this stuff, but I also can assure you that as we move along, you're going to start to understand and you're going to start to be more comfortable with it and see a pattern. So with that said, I have a simple diagram here with just some different concepts and parts of Redux. And if you want to look more into these, you can look at redux.js.org/glossary, where it explains state, actions, reducers, and so on. So basically, we have two kinds of state. We have component level state and we have global state, also called application state. Now, component level state has to do with a specific component, and you know what components are. We've already created a bunch: the header, the footer, stuff like that. The screens are also components. An example would be of component level state would be, let's say, a slider or a drop-down menu, something like that. You might have a piece of component state, which is essentially just a JavaScript object with some values, with some key value pairs. You might have something called open, which could be either true or false, and depending on that true or false value, the menu would display as opened or closed. So that's just a simple example of component level state, and that's not what you would have in Redux. Redux is for application or global state, and an example of that would be our products. Because our products we're going to want to use in multiple components, or just access, maybe update products, add products, delete, things like that. So you want them available to all of your components. And of course, you could put all of your state in like the app.js file and just pass pieces of state up and down through props, but that gets very, very messy, and you definitely don't want to do that with an application of this size. It's fine for, you know, small little applications with just a little bit of state, but for something like this, you don't want to do that. So some other examples of stuff we might have in our global state is the authenticated user. So when we log in, we want to have access to that user's data. That'll be held in the state. The shopping cart items, orders, stuff like that, that would all be in the global state. Now, as far as what this stuff is, reducers, actions, you already know what components are, you know what the server is. This is our back end with Express. So the way that state is changed is through reducers or reducer functions. And they're basically just functions that accept actions, and they're responsible for manipulating and passing the state down to components. Now, actions are just objects that represent the intention to change a piece of state. We also have action creators, which are functions that will dispatch or fire off those actions. And I know that's a little confusing. To give you an example, we may have an action creator function called getProducts. And in that action creator, we make a fetch request to the back end to get data using Axios or the Fetch API or whatever. And then we get that data back, and then we dispatch an action to the reducer, and we attach a payload to it. And that payload will have the fetch data. Now in the reducer, we can assign that payload data to the state, and we can pass it down to any components that ask for it. Okay, so we can have multiple components that ask for the same piece of state. So think of state as like a cloud hovering over your application, and when we need something to happen, like let's say we want to click a button and fetch some data from the server and then display it, we have to create an action or an action creator to dispatch a specific action to the reducer, and then the reducer passes it down to the component. Again, I know this might sound super confusing. I've always had trouble explaining Redux in theory and looking at diagrams and stuff, but most people really tend to grasp it when we start to jump into the code and see how it actually works. And one thing I forgot to mention is Redux is not something that is specifically attached to React. You can use Redux on its own. You can use Redux with other frameworks. There's a package in addition to Redux that we're going to use called React Redux that actually connects the two together. All right, so just know that Redux it's not part of React. It's not used just with React. It's just very popular with React. All right, so in the next video, we're going to go ahead and start to get set up. We're going to install Redux as well as the React Redux package, set up our boilerplate, and then start to work with our product reducer and create some actions to get the data from the back end. Because right now we just have that stuff right in the component, and that's not how we want to do it.